As promised, today I'll be breaking down Fyrakk the Blazing on normal and heroic difficulties. This fight is a 3-stage encounter. During the first phase, you'll see roots of Amirdrassil at the back of the arena. The main aim here is to keep Raging Flames away from them until you get the boss down to 70% health. If Raging Flames do reach the roots, then Amirdrassil burns, wiping the raid. Wildfire will spawn Raging Flames across the back of the arena that will slowly get closer to the roots the more he casts it. You just need to simply DPS him down before these pools get close to the roots. He will also cast Firestorm, dealing damage to all players, leaving swirlies you need to dodge, and also causing 3 random players to drop Raging Flames after a few seconds. These players should position themselves as close to the current fire pools as possible to keep them stacked up nicely and away from the roots. Note that if you place them towards the middle of the encounter, you'll have even more time before they reach the roots. Fyrakk will slash the tank with Fyrakk's Bite, dealing large upfront damage and marking them with Fyrakk's Mark. This debuff deals stacking Shadow Flame damage. Tanks will need to taunt swap after a few stacks to keep the incoming damage as low as possible. You'll also need to make sure you're facing away from the raid to prevent the frontal, Fyrakk's Flame from travelling through the whole raid. In phase 1, upon reaching max energy, the boss will cast Dream Rend. This creates a portal which radiates damage and pulls players in over 8 seconds. The closer players are to this portal, the more damage they take, so your whole raid should move to a pre-organised spot across the encounter. If a player is caught in the pool, they become incinerated and will quickly die. The final mechanic during phase 1 is Fyrakk's Burning Presence, constantly radiating out damage to your raid, and periodically applying a flame debuff to random players. This debuff constantly stacks on itself, dealing more fire damage. Healers will want to dispel this ASAP to avoid players reaching high stacks. Upon reaching the intermission, Fyrakk will begin channeling Corrupt. This gives him a shield equal to 6% of his health, and you'll have 30 seconds to break it, otherwise your raid will wipe. While the shield holds, he will be channeling Shadow Flame Breath, so avoid standing in front of him. During this time, Shadow Flame Orbs will travel from the place Raging Flames towards Fyrakk. These orbs must be intercepted by players to prevent them from reaching him, as this will cause a Shadow Flame eruption, dealing a large amount of raid-wide damage and applying a stacking dot for each one to reach him. As Fyrakk spawns in, he'll cast Flamefall as he re-enters his humanoid form, dealing lethal damage to anybody in the landing area, so make sure you stay away so you take less damage. Now we enter phase 2. During this phase, the heart of Amirdrassil will need to be saved. To ensure this, healers must heal up the spirits of the Kaldorite once they spawn in. Upon reaching full health, they gain a 99% damage reduction buff, so they are less likely to be killed. We need to keep them alive as the heart of Amirdrassil is constantly losing health through this phase, and if it ever reaches 0, the raid will wipe. These spirits sacrifice their health upon reaching the tree to keep it healthy, make sure they're topped. Similar to phase 1, Fyrakk will cast Greater Firestorm, calling meteors down on players which deal damage and create some smaller meteor shards you need to dodge. Each meteor here will spawn a Burning Colossus ad. They'll deal large tank damage but will also deal pulsing damage to all players within 15 yards. These ads must be nuked down before they reach 100 energy, as they will cast Exploding Core, dealing a large amount of damage to the raid and applying a dot. Finally, during phase 2, while the Colossus ads are present, he'll fly up and across the room with Shadow Flame Devastation. Players must dodge this massive beam or you'll die. The breath will also spawn several Screaming Soul ads. They'll cast Searing Screams, which deals damage to all players. Every time they cast this spell, it will deal more damage and also convert any nearby spirits of the Kaldorite into another Screaming Soul. Interrupt and CC these mobs as much as possible while bursting them down so that they don't interfere with the spirits. After a few minutes, Fyrakk will transition to phase 3. He'll cast Incarnate again, dealing damage and knocking everyone up upon impact. Here's where you'll want to lust. At the beginning of this phase, seeds of Amirdrassil will spawn that need to be picked up by confident players. As while players are holding these seeds, if they take any Shadow Flame damage, it will then become a blazing seed, which pulses out damage to the entire raid for 6 seconds, potentially wiping you. If you get targeted by a mechanic while holding a seed, just use your extra action button to drop it while you deal with the mechanic. These seeds need to stay healthy, as when Fyrakk casts Apocalypse Roar, 1 or 2 players will need to use their extra action button in Bloom to save the raid. This creates a 9-yard shield which absorbs a large amount of incoming damage for 6 seconds. Players will need to stand in this Bloom to live the roar, as it will probably one-shot or kill you through the 12-second dot that is applied. Your raid DPS will determine how many roars you have to deal with, so get him down quick. Outside of this, he'll cast Eternal Firestorm, targeting random players with meteors that must be taken out of the raid, as they'll also create a swirling firestorm which players must dodge. If you have a seed while targeted by a meteor, make sure to drop it for your friends to pick up. Fyrakk will turn to a random direction and cast Shadow Flame Breath, dealing lethal damage to anybody struck, so make sure to sidestep this. Finally, during this phase, tanks will have to deal with the boss's Infernal Maw, dealing massive amounts of physical damage and applying a stacking Shadow Flame dot on the tank, so tanks should taunt swap at low stacks here to keep damage to a minimum. On heroic difficulty, in all phases random players will receive a blaze debuff. This debuff will cause flames to shoot outward, dealing damage to players caught in it. Players must make sure to move away from others before this debuff expires, and make sure you stay away from players with seeds here. But that's all you need to know to take down Fyrakk the Blazing on normal and heroic difficulties, so good luck on getting you ahead of the curve. If this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below and subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.